Montana Territory, 1879. Rain hit the prairie hard the night Rosalind Ellery ran. Thunder cracked over the hills like gunfire, her boots sinking in the mud as she climbed over the back fence of her father's land. Her dress was soaked through, dragging heavy behind her, but she kept going. She had waited too long, planned too carefully to stop now. She did not look back. Her ribs still ached from the last time he had struck her. Her arms were marked where he had gripped her too tight, his drunken rage spilling out again like it always did. But this time she left. She had hidden a small bag behind the barn flour, dried beans, a tin cup, her mother's locket. She took it and ran. By morning, the storm had passed. The grass steamed under the sun and her legs burned from walking all night. She followed the old cattle trail west, keeping to the brush, the mountains ahead like a line of promise. By the third day, her boots had split at the seams. She had slept under a tree, stomach empty, hands shaking from cold and hunger. She was not sure she could keep going. That was when she heard the horse. It was just one rider moving slow. His horse was dark and lean, saddlebags packed heavy. The man wore a long coat, dusted with road dirt. A rifle was slung across his back, but his hands rested easy on the reins. She stepped out from behind the scrub. "Please," she said, voice hoarse. "Please, I need help." The cowboy pulled up his horse, eyes steady on her. He had a square jaw, sun-browned skin, and a quiet way of looking that made her feel seen and not judged. "You alone out here?" he asked. She nodded. "I left home." He studied her face a long moment. "You hurt?" "A little." She kept her hands clenched around the strap of her bag. "But I ain't going back." He nodded once. "Name's Vayden Ellsworth. You can ride with me as far as Butte. There's a doctor there." "Decent folks, too." Rosalind hesitated, then stepped closer. "Rosalind Ellery." He reached down and offered his hand. "Come on up, Miss Ellery." She took it. His grip was strong and warm. He pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing at all. They rode in silence for a while. The wind pulled at her wet dress, and she leaned forward just enough to feel the steady rise and fall of his breath under her cheek. "You got family in Butte?" he asked. "No," she said. "No one." He nodded again. "Then we will figure something out." They stopped near a creek that night. Vayden built a fire, his movements sure and practiced. He tossed her a dry blanket and handed her half a biscuit from his saddlebag. "Not much," he said, "but it will hold you." She took it. "Thank you." After they ate, she sat close to the fire, rubbing warmth back into her fingers. Vayden sat across from her, watching the flames. "You ran from someone," he said simply. "My father." He looked over at her and his jaw tightened. "He hurt you?" Her eyes met his. "Yes." He nodded, then reached for a stick and poked at the fire. "Well." "You are not going back." She watched him a long time, unsure what to say. Most men would have asked more, most would have judged, but Vayden just sat quiet, keeping the fire going, keeping her warm. They rode together the next day and the next. Each night he gave her his coat. Each morning he made sure she had something to eat. He never asked for anything, never questioned her past. By the seventh day they reached Butte. It was a rough town, but full of movement, miners, traders, stores, and smells of bread and coal smoke. Vayden led her straight to the doctor's house, helped her down, and stood by while she was checked over. "She is bruised, but nothing broken," the doctor told him. "She needs rest, food, time." Vayden paid the man in silver coin and helped her back outside. "I will get you a room at the boarding house just up this hill," he said. "You will be safe there." Rosalind looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" He did not smile, but his eyes softened. "Because someone should have, and I was the one who found you." She stepped closer. "You are leaving, then?" He hesitated. "I was headed south, but I can stay a few days." "I would like that," she whispered, so he stayed. He brought her food, showed her the town, walked her to the creek where the cottonwoods grew high and the water ran cold. And one afternoon, as they sat on a flat rock near the bank, Rosalind turned to him and said, "I do not want you to leave." Vayden looked at her, long and quiet. "You sure?" "Yes," she said, "I am." He reached out, brushed her cheek with his hand. "Then I will not go anywhere." She leaned into him, and for the first time in her life she felt safe. and she knew deep in her chest, in a way that was calm and true, that she had found home. The boarding house sat on a slope just east of Broadway, its porch shaded by a crooked pine and a sagging canvas awning. Inside, the rooms were narrow, the walls thin, and the bed creaked if she shifted too much, but it was clean and quiet, and no one raised a hand or voice. That was more than enough. Rosalind stood at the window after breakfast, holding her hair in one fist as she braided it. The view overlooked a few rooftops and the black line of smoke curling from the smelter. She could still see the mountains far off, pale in the morning light. When she finished with her braid, she stepped into her boots and went downstairs. Vayden waited outside, one hand resting on the hitch rail, his hat pulled low. He had shaved that morning and his coat was brushed clean. She noticed things like that, now small details he never called attention to, but which always seemed to align themselves with her comfort. "You sleep all right?" he asked, eyes still on the street. "Well enough," she said, stepping down beside him. "Miss Hattie gave me coffee. Said I looked like someone still learning how to breathe." He glanced at her then, not with pity but quiet understanding. "She's sharp. Used to run a mail stop outside Helena, back when the road was nothing but ruts and guesswork." They walked together toward the market row. The streets were muddy from last night's rain, wagon wheels cutting deep into the clay. A boy drove a small herd of goats past, whistling through his teeth, and someone hollered about tobacco from the corner. Vayden angled toward a low building with a wide stoop and a faded sign painted with a boot and hammer. "You'll need proper boots," he said, pushing the door open for her. Inside, the air smelled of leather and linseed oil. A man behind the counter looked up from stitching a sole. "Morning, Vayden." "Who's your friend?" "This is Miss Ellery," Vayden said. "She's looking for a pair that won't fall apart in 3 days." The cobbler nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "Got something sturdy in the back. Give me a minute." Rosalind looked down at her torn shoes, then up at Vayden. "You don't have to, I know," he said, voice even. "But I want to." She didn't argue. Not this time. They left the shop with a new pair wrapped in brown paper. She carried them tucked under one arm, feeling the weight of them, real boots meant to last, made for walking forward. They passed the freight depot, where men hauled crates and called to each other over the clatter of wagons. Vayden stopped beside a painted bench and nodded toward it. "Let's sit a while." She eased down beside him, the package in her lap. The sun had risen enough to warm the boards beneath their feet, and the air held a hint of pine. "You fought to leave," he said after a long stretch. "That don't come easy." "I waited too long," she said. "I told myself things would change. That if I was careful, quiet, maybe he wouldn't." She stopped, watching a fly land on her sleeve. "But I was wrong." Vayden didn't shift or speak to fill the silence. He waited. "One night I found a letter my mother wrote," she said finally. "She hid it in the floorboards. Said she planned to leave too, but never got the chance. Told me not to stay if it ever got too dark." He looked over at her, something quiet moving across his features. "She ever make it out?" "No," she said, "but I did." He nodded, jaw tight. "Then she's part of that." They sat without speaking for a while longer, the sun tracing slow lines across the street. Somewhere down the block, a fiddle played behind a shuttered window. Rosalind closed her eyes, letting the sound settle in her chest. When she opened them, Vayden was watching her. Not like a man waiting for something, but like one listening for what came next. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she said. "You don't have to know right away," he said. "You can take your time. Work if you want, rest if you need." "I won't go unless you ask me to." Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the sharp, unfamiliar pull of hope. "I don't want you to go," she said. He held her gaze, steady and sure. "Then I'll stay." A wagon passed, its wheels creaking, and the moment settled between them like something placed gently and meant to be kept. She rose first, boots still in hand. "I'd like to see the ridge above town. I heard there's wildflowers up there." "I'll take you," he said. And they walked on, side by side, toward the hill where the wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of something not yet spoken, but already growing. The ridge above but opened wide and quiet under an early spring sky, soft patches of yellow arnica and wild lupine pushing up through last snowmelt. Rosalind stepped carefully between stones, her new boots stiff but sure beneath her. Vayden walked beside her, one hand resting lightly on his belt, the wind tugging at the collar of his shirt. He didn't talk much, but he didn't need to. She could feel his presence, the steadiness of it like the earth beneath her feet. The ridge sloped gently toward a line of leaning pines, and from up here, the scattered roofs of Butte looked like a patchwork quilt stitched into the land. "You rode through here before?" she asked, watching him scan the horizon. "Last summer," he said. "Didn't stop long. Just watered the horse and moved on." She leaned into the wind a little, hair catching in the corners of her mouth. "Why'd you stop this time?" He crouched down, ran his fingers through the dry grass. "Didn't figure I would, but there you were." She turned toward him. "If you hadn't come by that day, you'd have made it somewhere," he said, standing again. "Might have taken longer, might have hurt worse, but you'd have come through." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out toward the far hills where the sky met the edge of pine. "I want to work," she said. "I can't sit in that room too long. I need to use my hands or I start thinking too much." He nodded slowly. "Miss Hattie keeps a kitchen garden out back. She mentioned wanting help turning the soil. I could ask her." "I'd like that," she said. "I know how to mend too." Vayden shifted his weight, boots scuffing the stone. "You ever think about staying longer than a season?" Rosalind looked up at him, brow furrowed. "In Butte, in one place," he said. "Doesn't have to be here." "I'm not sure I know how," she said. "I've always been waiting for something to go wrong." His eyes met hers and he took a step closer. "Then maybe it's time to wait for something to go right." She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice caught. Instead, she reached out, fingers brushing the back of his hand. He didn't pull away. They walked again, slower now, the wind quieter. A hawk circled overhead and the sun slid low enough to warm their backs. That evening, she returned to the boarding house and found Miss Hattie standing at the back gate, a shovel leaning against her hip. "Garden's a mess," the older woman said without looking up. "Ground's hard like iron and I've got more roots than sense." Rosalind stepped through the gate, rolling up her sleeves. "I'm no miracle, but I can work a spade." Miss Hattie stepped aside. "Then let's get to it." By dusk, they had cleared half the plot. Rosalind's hands were blistered, dirt pressed under her nails, and her arms ached in a good way. When she finally sat on the back step, Vayden was already there, holding out a tin cup half full with lukewarm tea. She took it, breathing in the faint scent of mint. "You always wait in gardens," he shrugged. "Only when someone worth waiting for is inside one." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. The quiet between them wasn't empty, it was full of something steady and unfolding. "I was thinking," he said, watching the clouds shift in the fading light, "about a piece of land not too far from here. Creek runs through it, bit of timber for building. I passed it once near Deer Lodge. It's wild still, but good bones." Rosalind turned toward him. "You thinking of settling?" "I might be," he said, "if I had reason." She held the cup tighter, the warmth of it sinking into her palms. "What would that reason be?" He looked at her then, not smiling, not speaking in riddles. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I don't know how to build a home," she said softly. "But I can learn." His voice was low and sure. "We'll learn together." The light faded slow and patient, and neither of them moved. Somewhere inside, Miss Hattie lit a lamp, the glow of it casting long shadows across the yard. Rosalind set the empty cup down beside her and reached for his hand. Her fingers curled into his with quiet certainty, and when he laced them back, it felt less like a beginning and more like something long searched for, finally found. The ground thawed hard and slow that year. In late April, Vayden and Rosalind rode out past the edge of Butte with a mule and a wagon borrowed from Miss Hattie's cousin. The back piled with seed sacks, oilcloth bundles, and tools wrapped in canvas. They followed the river south, the route rough in places where ice still clung to the shaded banks, but the sun carried warmth that hadn't been there weeks before. They didn't speak much on the trail, both of them busy with thought and the pace of the mule. The land grew quieter the farther they went. No more tin pans banging in alleyways, no more wagons groaning under oar. Just cottonwoods budding pale green along the water and the occasional hawk drifting above the ridge. They reached it by evening on the third day. The land Vayden had spoken of lay in a narrow valley pressed between two arms of wooded hills, the creek curling through it like a ribbon of glass. A stand of alder trees shaded the northern edge, and the clearing opened wide enough for planting, though the soil was still rough and uneven. Rosalind stepped down first, boots sinking into damp grass. A breeze came through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine smoke from somewhere far off. Vayden watched her as she walked toward the creek. "It's not much yet," he said, "but it's good ground, water's clean. Elk pass through sometimes." She stooped to touch the soil, rubbing it between her fingers. "It's enough." They set up camp near the bank, Vayden pitching their canvas lean-to by lamplight while Rosalind cut potatoes into a tin pot and set it to boil over the fire. Her shoulders ached from the ride, but the ache felt honest, not like the kind that came from holding herself too small for too long. "Where'd you learn to set a line that straight?" she asked, nodding at the tight corners of the canvas. "Worked with a trail crew near Leadville a few years back," he said. "Foreman had a temper like dry powder, but he taught me to tie a shelter so it wouldn't tear in wind." She stirred the pot. "I never left Montana before this. You ever want to?" he asked, sitting across from her, the firelight painting lines across his face. "I used to think about St. Louis, sometimes Chicago, somewhere with lamps in the windows at night and carriages clattering on cobbles. But those places only ever lived in books." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "You miss the books." "I miss what they promised," she said. "Women who got to choose, who weren't born into someone else's rage." Vayden didn't answer right away. He reached behind him, pulled a folded cloth bundle from the mule's pack and handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside, wrapped in flannel, were two worn volumes, one of poetry and another marked with weathered ink, The Prairie Traveler. "I saw them at a trading post near Helena last month," he said. "Figured they might suit you." Her hands closed over the books. "You remembered." "I remember a lot," he said. The wind picked up again, rustling the alder leaves. The fire popped, sending sparks upward into the dark. "Do you ever wonder what you'd be doing now if you hadn't come down that trail that day?" she asked. "No," he said. "I don't." She looked up from the fire. "Why not?" "Because whatever it was, it wouldn't have led here." She set the books aside and reached across the space between them, her fingers brushing his. He turned his hand, catching hers in his palm. "I want to build something that holds," she said, "not just a roof. Something that stays." "We'll do it together," he said, "one board at a time." That night they lay under the canvas, the walls of the valley closing around them like arms. She curled against him, not from cold but from certainty, her breath slowing to match the rhythm of his. In the morning they would begin. There would be sweat blisters, days where the wind tore through the trees and made everything harder. But the ground was theirs now, and the sky above it, and what they built would be built with care, not from fear, not from flight, but from choice. By early May, the frost was gone from the valley floor, and Rosalind helped Vayden dig post holes for the cabin. The work was hard, and the wind carried grit that stuck to their skin, but she liked the rhythm of it, earned and steady. They took turns with the auger, and when her arms began to shake, he passed her a tin mug of water without a word, as if he understood before she even asked. One morning, as she squared a beam along the notched frame, she caught Vayden watching her. He stood near the wagon, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, a plane in one hand, sawdust dusting his forearm. "You ever build anything like this before?" she asked, brushing hair from her cheek. He rested the tool on the wagon rail. "A line shack out near Bannack once. Roof leaked like sin, but the walls held." She leaned against the beam. "This'll be better." He crossed the clearing and tilted his head toward the rise behind the trees. "Come with me. I want to show you something." They followed a deer trail up through the alder brush, boots crunching softly over last year's leaves. The slope rose gently, and at the crest, the valley opened up below them, cabin frame like a child's drawing, creek glinting silver, their mule grazing near the canvas lean-to. "I thought maybe later on," he said. "When the roof's on and the ground's dry, we could build a second room off the back." "Something with a tall window." She turned toward him. "For what?" "For whatever you fill it with," he said. "Could be books, could be a loom, could be a cradle." Rosalind looked out over the valley again, her throat tight in a way that didn't hurt. "You think we'll have enough?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "Enough for what?" "For a life, a real one, not just surviving." He stepped behind her, close but not touching. "We already passed surviving, Rose." The wind tugged at her braid. She turned. "You've never called me that before." "I didn't want to until it meant something," he said. "It does now." She reached up, touched his chest. "Then say it again." He took her hand in his and kissed her knuckles, slow. "Rose." They didn't rush the cabin. They cut every joint by hand, shaped rafters until they fit clean, and stacked stone for the hearth with care. Some days it rained, and they worked beneath oilcloth. Some days they stopped early and sat beneath the pines, eating cold beans and tracing the shape of the world they were building. When the roof was finally on, Vayden hung a small horseshoe over the door, bent from a mule shoe they'd found rusted near the creek. "Supposed to bring luck," he said. She smiled, leaning in the doorway. "We already have that." They moved inside as soon as the floor was finished, blankets on the boards, a cook pot hung over the hearth. Vayden brought in firewood, and Rosalind unpacked the books he'd given her, setting them on a shelf made from polished pine. One night, when the fire had burned low and the wind pressed soft against the cabin walls, she touched his wrist where he lay beside her. "I never thought I'd feel safe again." Vayden turned to her, his voice low. "You're not just safe. You're home." "I want to marry you," she said, steady and sure. "Not because I have to, because I choose to." He stared at her a long moment, then nodded once. "Then tomorrow we'll ride into Deer Lodge. I'll speak with Reverend Ames. And we'll do it proper." They married in a clapboard church with a wide porch and chipped white paint. Miss Hattie came, bringing a jar of preserves and a spool of lace. The Reverend's wife pressed a bouquet of wild iris into Rosalind's hands, and when Vayden kissed her, it felt like a promise made good. They rode back to the valley side by side, the sun warm on their backs. That night, Vayden lit a lantern and set it in the window, the glass glowing soft against the dark. She leaned against his side as he wrapped an arm around her waist, his touch quiet and certain. "I'll build the second room come fall," he said. Rosalind rested her head on his shoulder. "For the cradle," he nodded, thumb tracing circles over the back of her hand. For the cradle, years passed. The cabin grew and so did the garden. A boy came first, then a girl with her mother's quiet eyes. Vayden carved their names into the doorframe as they grew, each season marked by pencil lines and laughter. They taught the children how to watch the sky, how to read the land, how to be kind and brave in equal measure. On rainy days, Rosalind read aloud beside the hearth, the children curled close, Vayden mending tack or whittling in the corner. They never left the valley. They never needed to. And every evening, as the sun slipped behind the ridge, Vayden set a hand on her back or brushed her hair from her face or kissed the hollow of her neck. Not because he had to, because he chose to. Home, after all, was not a place. It was the life they built together, board by board, word by word. And it held.